My name is Leah Townsend, and on the night I turned 35, my mother threw me a birthday dinner with a moving truck built into the plan. Private room, white tablecloth, my whole family around one table. Halfway through her toast, she leaned over to my father and said it low like she was ordering dessert. "Since everyone's here, have your son let the movers into her apartment tonight?" My brother set down his napkin, picked up his jacket, and walked out without a word to me. The party rolled on. Cake, candles, my mother singing the loudest. 1 hour later, Kyle came back through that door with his face the color of hospital sheets, and his phone still glowing in his hand. And he bent down to her ear and whispered, "Mom, the movers called the police." Her smile died right there between the coffee cups. And then my phone, the one she'd tried to drop into her little phone basket, started ringing loud in front of everyone. What happened when that officer asked for the owner of record is the part my family still can't say out loud. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud in all the right ways. If your family has ever treated your keys like community property, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up 14 months to the spring my mother started measuring my apartment with her eyes. I'm a cardiac step-down nurse at Millbrook General here in Ohio. 12 years on the floor, most of them nights. My hands don't shake. That's not bragging. It's just what happens when you've held enough monitors steady at 3 o'clock in the morning. I live alone in Unit 1 of an old brick fourplex at 412 Maple Avenue, 10 minutes from the hospital. Oak floors that creak in the same 3 places. A porch light I fixed myself. Rent, as far as my family knew, was $850 a month, paid to some company nobody had ever met. Her little rented place, my mother liked to call it, the way you'd describe a folding chair. She said it at Easter. She said it at funerals. She said it to the cashier at Hartman's grocery once, loud, while I stood right there holding the green beans. I never argued. I just smile and say the building, and I had an arrangement, and let her roll her eyes. My best friend from nursing school thinks I'm too quiet about my own life. And she's probably right. Over-responsibility, she calls it. You spend enough years keeping a whole hallway of patients calm. You start doing it at Sunday dinner, too. Smoothing things, absorbing things, keeping everybody's numbers in range. That was my job in the Towns and family. The steady one, the one who didn't need anything. So, she made a handy shelf for everyone else's needs. I'm telling you all this because you need the before picture. Before the folder, before the pry bar, before a moving crew stood on my porch at 7 at night and made a phone call my mother will never forgive them for. It started, like most family disasters do, at a Sunday dinner that tasted like pot roast and felt like a chess opening. Sunday dinner at my parents' house ran on assigned seats. Nobody assigned out loud. Mom Linda at the head closest to the kitchen, she commanded like a bridge deck. Snorts of Dad at the far end nodding along. Roy Townsend has spent 40 years agreeing with my mother in the same soft voice he uses on Car Salesman. Kyle showed up 20 minutes late with Megan, kissed Mom's cheek and stole a roll off my plate like we were still 12 and 9. The menu never changed. Neither did the rankings. Somewhere between the roast and the pie, Mom asked if my landlord had raised my rent yet, and I said no. And she smiled at the table like I'd confessed something. 34 years old and still renting. She said, "You know what your father and I had at your age? Equity." I said, "Equity didn't keep me warm at night," which was my mistake because sarcasm, to my mother, is an invitation. She set down her fork. She patted my hand like a nurse pats a difficult patient, which I found professionally insulting. "You rent a life, Leah. We built one." Nobody laughed, but nobody objected either. And that silence was its own kind of applause. Dad studied his plate. Kyle checked his phone. I looked around the house my mother built, the drapes, the china cabinet, the wall of framed Christmases, and that's when I noticed the envelopes, a stack of them shoved behind the flower vase on the sideboard, shoved fast. The way you hide things from company, unopened. The top one had a red stripe across it. The kind banks use when they've stopped asking nicely. My mother caught me looking and moved the vase 3 into the left. Pie, she said. I said yes to the pie, but I drove home that night doing the math on that red stripe, and none of it added up to equity. 2 Sundays later, my mother stood up before dessert and made an announcement with her champagne posture on. Your father and I have decided to simplify. We are selling the house. She said, simplify. The way other people say cruise. Downsizing. She called it a new chapter. She'd already had the hedges trimmed for photos. Kyle said, wow, Mom. Big move. And she touched her collarbone and said, well, we're not getting younger, and this place is just so much house. Here's what struck me, and I want you to sit with it the way I did. My parents had lived in that house for 31 years. My mother once repainted the hallway twice in 1 month, because the first beige red at dusk. That woman does not simplify. That woman fortifies. And Dad didn't say a thing during the whole announcement. He turned his water glass in little circles, and looked at the tablecloth like it owed him money. When I asked how long they had been thinking about it, Mom said, oh, it's very recent, sweetheart. Very sudden. We just woke up one day and knew. Then she went to get the pie and I picked up the realtor's folder she'd left on the sideboard. Glossy, dog-eared, full of comps and a listing agreement with a signature line already flagged in yellow. The date on the cover letter was from 6 weeks back. Very recent, very sudden. Kyle followed me into the kitchen later and said, don't make it weird, Lee. They are allowed to sell their own house. He was right. They were. But on my way out, I passed the sideboard again, and the stack of striped envelopes behind the vase had grown taller, and somebody had rubber banded them, which is what my mother does to problems she's decided to schedule instead of solve. I didn't know yet what was in them. I just knew the word for that rubber band wasn't simplify. That Thursday, I took my dinner break early and drove out to Fair Oaks to see Mrs. Pearson. She's 78, sharp as a lancet, and she's been mad at the assisted living jello since the day she moved in. They call this cherry, she said, poking it. Leah, I've buried 2 husbands. I know cherry. I took her blood pressure while she complained because she likes the ritual, and honestly, so do I. 132/78. You'll outlive the building, I told her. And she said, I'd better not. I just got the chairs how I like them. We've been like this for years. Ever since I was her tenant, and she was my landlady back when she owned the fourplex on Mapler, and lived across the hall in Unit 1 with her cat and her opinions. I brought her the mail from her old P.O. box, a new large print crossword and the gossip. My parents were selling the house. She stopped poking the jello. Mrs. Pearson has a way of looking at you like an X-ray with eyebrows. Selling, she said. Linda Townsend, the woman who wouldn't part with a casserole dish. I said, people change. And she snorted so hard the jello wobbled. Then she got quiet, the shrewd kind of quiet. And she said the thing she always circles back to when my family comes up. They still don't know about the papers we signed. I busied myself with her pill organizer. No, I said, nobody knows. She watched me sort Tuesday from Wednesday. Smart girl, she said at last and then softer. Sad though. A family you have to keep in the dark isn't a family. It's an audience. I kissed her forehead and told her the cherry jello was actually strawberry, which scandalized her enough to change the subject. But her question rode home in the passenger seat. The papers we signed. Hold that thought. My mother was about to start asking questions of her own. The next week, I swung by my parents' place to drop off Dad's blood pressure refill because that's a thing I do. And the side door was open, and that's how I heard it. My mother in the den on the phone using her office voice. The one with no pie in it. No, we cannot push the closing. I need it done by the 30th. The 30th? Yes. A pause. The number is the number. We'll take it. Just make it fast. I stood in the kitchen holding a pharmacy bag and did what nurses do. I read the chart. On the counter, half under a placemat, sat a statement from Millbrook Savings. Second mortgage, past due. The kind of number that doesn't fit in a family that owns the word equity. I put the refill by the coffee maker and let myself out before she finished. And I sat in my car in their driveway feeling the whole story rearrange itself. The buyout Dad took from the tool and die plant 3 years ago, the one Mom called your father's smart exit, was gone. The house wasn't a chapter. It was a tourniquet. And here's the part that told me exactly who I was dealing with. That same night, Aunt Carol called me delighted because Mom had phoned her that afternoon to chat about the sale. Your mother says they want to travel, Carol said. Arizona in the winters. Isn't that wonderful? My mother had a foreclosure clock ticking on her kitchen counter, and within hours, she'd already wallpapered it with a story about sunsets. Smooth, no seams. She'd been lying to her own sister since before dinner, and Carol never heard a single joint creak. I said, wonderful, and hung up and wrote one sentence in the notes app one usually save for patient handoffs: Mom is broke. Mom is lying. And Mom always shops for a solution. Then underneath it, what does she think I have? The answer arrived in the form of questions, little ones, sprinkled like seasoning over the next 2 Sundays. How long is your lease, honey? Month to month. Interesting. Does that landlord company ever even check on the place? Do they know what units go for now? And then passing the gravy with the casual aim of a sniper, does Kyle still have your spare key from when he helped you move in? I kept my face in neutral, which is a skill you learn the first time a patient's family screams at you about visiting hours. Why do you ask? I said. Oh, no reason, said my mother, who has never once in her life had no reason. She was more than a year too late with that question. 14 months earlier, I'd come home from a double shift and found my kitchen smelling like chicken soup. I didn't own a pot on my stove. A note in her handwriting, you never eat right. Love, Mom. She'd let herself in with a key she'd borrowed off Kyle's ring. Just to be sweet, she said later. Just being a mother. I thanked her for the soup. Then I called Hendrick's Lock and Key the same afternoon, and had every door on that building rekeyed. All 4 units, my cost. I put a monitored alarm on Unit 1 while I was at it, door sensors, glass break, one of those camera doorbells that talks. The alarm company files my cell number under a word my family had never heard connected to me. And we'll get to that. The point is, when my mother asked about Kyle and my spare key, she was asking about a key to a door that no longer answered it. I passed her the gravy and said keys were funny things. She smiled. I smiled. 2 women at one table, each certain she knew something the other didn't. The difference is one of us had receipts and the other one had a plan. The plan got a name on a Tuesday. Mom invited me over, just us girls, made coffee in the good cups, and unveiled what she called the family consolidation plan, a phrase she pronounced like it had a logo. It went like this: the house sells, the parents transition, and Leah, that's me, moves home for a while to help temporarily, just till things settle. And your apartment, she said, stirring, well, we wouldn't want it going to waste, would we? There it was. Not a request, a reasoning. I set my cup down and said, no, Mom. I'm not giving up my place. One sentence level. The same voice I used to tell families visiting hours are over. Her chin did the wobble. Not the sad wobble, the loading wobble. Like a slot machine deciding which guilt to pay out. She landed on the classic. After everything your father and I have done for you, a lifetime of sacrifice, Leah. I carried you for 9 months. I said, and I've been carrying Dad's prescriptions for 6 years, so maybe we're square on cargo. Too far, maybe? Felt fair at the time. She inhaled for the second round, and right then the phone rang in the den, and my father did something he never does. He moved fast, snatched it up on half a ring, said, "Hold on," and walked it out to the garage, pulling the door shut behind him with his shoulder. Through the kitchen window, I watched him pace by the workbench, head down, one hand pressed flat on the hood of his truck like he was keeping it from floating away. My mother watched me watch him. "Wrong number," she said before I'd asked anything. I drove back to my own apartment, mine, and stood a minute in the doorway counting the locks I'd paid for. Whatever was on that phone call, my father needed a garage to hold it. Kyle's turn came that Friday. He texted, then called, then just showed up at Maplehurst with a 6-pack and his helpful face on. My brother sells trucks at the dealership out on Route 9. And I say this with love, I know his walk around when I'm in it. First the warm-up, work's good. Megan's good. Then the pivot, hey, weird thing. I think I've still got your old spare key somewhere. Want me to swing it by? I could check your smoke detectors while I'm up there. Landlords supposed to do that. And you know those company landlords. They never. I told him my smoke detectors were fine. I told him he could mail the key. He laughed like I'd made a joke, then stood on my porch a bit too long, looking at the door, at the frame, at the little blue alarm company decal by the bell. Though I'd bet my license he never registered it. People see what they expect. He expected his big sister's cheap rental. He left the 6-pack, hugged me one-armed, and from my front window, I watched him sit in his truck in the dark and type with both thumbs. The porch light catching that little glow on his face. He wasn't texting Megan. Megan gets one thumb and emojis. That was a report. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. Thick cardstock. My mother's looping cursive. The pleasure of your company. Leah's 35th birthday dinner. The Hearthstone. Private room. 6:30, the 14th, everyone's coming, she'd written, even Grandma Ruth from Columbus. I stood at my kitchen counter reading it twice. Never once in my life had my mother booked me so much as a Denny's. Now there was a private room with my name on it, and a guest list and cardstock. When a woman who is drowning in a second mortgage starts renting banquet rooms, she is not celebrating you. She is scheduling something. I pinned it to the fridge and started paying attention. Before we get to the folder, you need the arithmetic my mother had been doing behind those casserole eyes. My rent, the rent everyone believed I paid, was $850 a month. Market rate for a one-bedroom in Millbrook had crept past $1,200. My mother knew this the way she knows the price of everything she doesn't own. That little deal you looked into, she called my apartment at the next Sunday dinner, and then she floated it casual as a leaf. You know what would make sense? A swap. Your father and I take the apartment. We don't need much. And you come home to your old room. Family helping family. She looked around the table for applause. Dad rearranged his peas. Kyle said, "Makes sense to me," a little too fast, like a man reading from a card. I said my apartment wasn't a timeshare. And Mom laughed her hostess laugh. The one that files your objection under jokes. It's practically family housing anyway, she said. You'd hardly notice the difference. I'd notice, Mom. I notice everything now. What chilled me wasn't the ask. Asks can be refused. It was the shape of it. She'd already measured the closets. She talked about the apartment the way you talk about a thing in your cart, right down to where her reading chair would go by my front window, where my reading chair currently lives. And she never once said the word rent with a number after it, because in her head the number was settled. $850 paid to a landlord company that never checked, never called, never cared. An absentee landlord is just an inheritance with extra steps. That was her math. She'd tried the company once, actually. Months back, a letter came addressed to Maplehurst Property Group, handwriting I'd know anywhere, asking about family lease transfers. I read it standing at my mailbox. I did not respond. The landlord, you see, was busy that week. The landlord was working 3/12s and a call shift. Aunt Carol called on a Wednesday while I was pulling into the hospital lot, and she opened with congratulations. You're a good daughter, Leah. Not everybody would do it. I sat there with my badge half clipped and asked what exactly I was doing. Giving your parents the apartment. Your mother told the whole prayer group. She said you insisted. You said, Mom, my home is your home. And honestly, it made me tear up. I watched a live flight helicopter cross the sky over the parking garage and understood that my mother had skipped negotiation entirely and gone straight to publication. The story was already out, polished, quotable, starring a version of me who talks like a greeting card. I said, Carol, I never offered anyone anything. Silence, the fizzy kind. But Linda said, why would she say it if? And there it was, the trap inside the trap. To correct the story, I had to call my mother a liar to her own sister, which would get reported back as Leah is having some kind of episode. My mother builds her lies like handrails. You can't knock them down without looking like the one who's falling. I told Carol, calm as a discharge summary, if Mom's moving somewhere, it's news to me. Maybe ask her about the closing date on the 30th. Let her chew on that specific little number. Carol went quiet in a new way. After the shift, I tried Mom's cell 3 times. Busy, busy. Voicemail. That evening, she texted me a recipe for lemon bars and the words "can't wait for your big day," with 2 exclamation points, which for my mother is practically a confession.